Hello, today we will be speaking about a person who purchases an item, some object, and then finds later that it was a stolen object. What does Jewish law say on this matter? So, Shulchan Aruch in chapter 356, Koshin Mishpat, the laws of monetary laws, this is where it's mainly discussed, and it mentions that if a rob or thief or robber, if they try to sell something, it's absolutely forbidden to purchase anything from them. You're not allowed to help them in any way or form. And on the contrary, one who does is being a very big instrumental to them continuing to steal more and more. The Gemara, which this law is based on, says a very interesting parable. It's not the mouse that steals, it's the hole in which the mouse goes through to make to steal his food. And that's really what the market is doing. When people are willing to buy from thieves, whatever they have, and stuff like that. So that influences, that helps make the ganav, the thief, steal more and more. So, therefore, what is the extent of which a purchaser needs to look into knowing that it's coming from a clean source, making sure that it was never stolen? What is the halacha, the Torah obligation? So we find that there is a difference between a ganav mefursam, a well-known ganav, and between a place where you just don't know the person altogether. However, the poskim also make another difference. They say that if you find an object way too below the market price, that is a sign that it could be that it's stolen. So I think it's the Aruch HaShulchan who says that if you find it about a third of its price value, that should bring attention to that it's probably coming from a stolen source. Because why would they sell it so low? Unless it's because they're just making a business out of stealing and selling at low prices and continuing to steal more and more. So that should raise suspicion. However, there are certain scenarios in which a person purchases something and doesn't necessarily know, and then finds out later that it was stolen. What does Halacha say about that? So the Gemara in Bava Kama, Kuftes Vav Aleph, 115a, explains that there is a rule called Tkanas HaShuk, the enactment of the market. What does it mean, the enactment, the Tkana of the Shuk? This was an enactment which says that if a person purchases from a source which was not necessarily a ganav, they really didn't know who they're buying it from, and then find out later that it was a stolen object, so the owner, which now located where the stolen object is in hands of so-and-so, they can go to them and demand their object back. However, they need to refund the person how much they paid. So if it's a doubt, if he says he paid $100, and it makes sense that was about what he should have sold for, so we believe him. That if he doesn't want, then he can make an oath of how much he paid for. But therefore, the owner would then reimburse the person who purchased it, and he gets his item back, and then the original owner will have to try to find or deal with the ganav to get his money back. But that is the rule of Tkanas HaShuk. That we didn't want that people will always be worried if they purchase something, they're going to say maybe it's stolen, maybe we'll never get my money back. So we made that they'll always get reimbursed. And again, if we're talking, however, about a ganav and a fursum, a well-known thief, so then it really won't help to say that when I purchased it, I didn't know. Because the whole rule of Tkanas HaShuk does not apply to when the person is a well-known ganav. It has to be a scenario which they didn't know and didn't necessarily show that it was from any unscrupulous source. The Ramah brings down, and so and that's the way the Shulchan Aruch rules. The Ramah brings another view, and he says that Yesh Omrim, another view, holds that even by a ganav, that even if the person was a ganav mefursam, a well-known ganav, you need to return the money to them. The Shach, however, rules, like the view of the Mechaber, that if it was a ganav meforse and a well-known ganav, we don't return the money. It's almost like a penalty, a fine. And I believe this is more or less what secular law also follows. That when a person purchases from something which was stolen, they don't get their money back. Now, the interesting thing, the Ramah adds another point. He says, and if the buyer says, I purchased it from this well-known ganav, but I purchased it because I wanted to do you a favor. I knew that you would want this object back. So I purchased it from him because I knew he's not going to just give it back to you. I purchased it so I can give it back to you, but I want to get paid for what I laid out for it. I laid $100 out, I want it back. In that case, the Ramah says, Neman, he is believed, you need to return back the money to him. Even if it was a ganav meforse, and even though he purchased it from a well-known ganav. And this, it says, the Ramah is L'kuli Alma, to all opinions. There's another rule, another law when we're talking about a ganav meforse, this rule of stealing, buying from a place which was buying from something, then you found out it was stolen. Is when we're talking about land, we don't make this rule. We don't make this exception. The Shulchan Aruch rules in chapter 360 of Choshen Mishpat. It says that by land there was never a rule to Tkanas Hashuk. There was never such a rule. Why was there never such a rule? Because by land it's something which is more or less known. Just because someone stole the land temporarily, that doesn't mean that you would have been that you can believe the person who sold it that it was his. I mean, ultimately, it's a big difference between buying a can of soda or between buying some big item. The bigger an item, the more you invest in it, the more you want to make sure that it's a legitimate sale. Selling land is a big to-do. It's a big deal. So you need to make sure, you need to be extremely sure that what you're buying is definitely legitimate. So the rule of Tkanas Hashuk will not apply to selling of land. And again, when we're talking about items like, let's say, more expensive items, cars, or things like that, so because the bigger the item, the more money, the more investment in it, it would be necessary to look into what we're buying from. So it would be very good advice that before we buy anything, we have to think about not like, oh, am I getting a good deal out of it? Ooh, it's a good find. It's almost like, as they say, a steal. Well, sometimes it could really, really be a steal. So you have to be very careful about this, and as the Shulchan Aruch says, because when we're not careful and we buy from a ganav, we are helping them steal more. So I hope this was helpful, and we look forward to our next class.